Tradition goes out the door at the University of Maryland, but perhaps a much-needed infusion of cash coming in. Welcome into the Sporting News Studios. My name is Tom Vandervoort, and joining me now on the phone, Sporting News columnist and Maryland alum David Steele. And David, I just have to ask you, when you first heard the news that Maryland was probably going to leave the ACC for the Big Ten, what occurred to you?
I think I was in denial, even though all the circumstances and everything that's happened the last few years with the finances of the athletic department and really the lack of progress the football program has made. It made sense, but it's still hard to believe that the school that I've spent my whole life associating with the ACC and the ACC tournament and maybe the best college basketball in the country, and North Carolina and Duke and NC State and all these legendary players and coaches and moments are all going to be a part of history, because it's going to be part of a league that you just never think that Maryland is as a part of. It's not Midwestern. It's, you don't tie Ohio State and Maryland together, or Michigan and Maryland, but that's the future, and I honestly had a hard time really grasping it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I wonder if, given the amount of money the athletic department was losing, given that they just cut 7 varsity sports and were perhaps having to cut even more, did they really have a choice, given that they're probably going to get $8 to $10 million more a year from the Big Ten?
It sure doesn't look like they had a choice. They really dug themselves a pretty deep financial hole over the last 5 years. I think the ACC made a big bet on football several years ago when they expanded and went to a conference championship game and brought Miami in, and thought that was going to give a big boost and Maryland was going to be a part of it, and they were in a very strong position at the time, and everything has kind of gone backwards since then, and everything that they had sunk into the program not only didn't help the program, but it worked to the detriment of all those other smaller sports, and that had really become a strength in Maryland. All the sports for women and some of the smaller, less well-known non-revenue sports, that had really become a strength, and now they were all threatened, and people had become accustomed to seeing that, and you didn't want to see that go away. And if this helps, retain that and sort of saves football and the other major sports, then I guess we have no choice but to move along and move away from the past and move toward a future in the Big Ten. It
absolutely feels that way, and I know this deal isn't really done yet, because it's not going to start until 2014 in theory, and I guess they've got until June, July to actually formally request exit from the ACC, and they got to come up with an exit fee. Right now it's $50 million. Is there a chance the deal doesn't end up going through, or do you think this is really what's going to happen?
It seems like it's on a fast path toward that, although we've seen a lot of deals fall through the last couple of years as there's been all this sort of seismic change among conferences all over the place, with TV deals being redone and teams sometimes jumping from one league to another without ever playing a game in the other league. You never know. There might be another offer from another league that, for whatever reason, Maryland is alluring to them. The Big Ten might find a reason to go after another team that is more alluring to them than Maryland is. So there's still a lot of factors, kind of a lot of moving parts in all of this, but so far you have 2 very willing partners. You have Maryland, who wants to get out of the situation they're in, and the Big Ten, which, it's become kind of a cliche. They want to expand that footprint. They've expanded out of the Midwest, kind of the way the Pac-10 has expanded away from the Pacific Coast, and the Southeastern Conference has expanded away from the Southeastern region. So, this is attractive to the Big Ten, and it's attractive to Maryland, and I think people are going to find ways to get all the other obstacles out of the way and make this happen.
So from the Big Ten's point of view, is this about the Big Ten network and that media footprint? Because if Rutgers were to come along in the deal, which a lot of people think might happen, that does give them a fairly robust reach.
It gives it a really huge reach. And you look back years ago when Penn State joined in, and obviously Penn State has a huge fan base of its own, but for decades it was very East Coast concentrated, so that was kind of their first foothold. And now, most people associate Penn State with the Big Ten, and that's pretty much what's going to happen with Maryland and Rutgers if they join up and stay in for a long time. They'll just be known as the eastern wing of that conference, and they're going to nail down some huge markets. Rutgers with the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, and Maryland with the D.C., Baltimore, Northern Virginia area, and those are 2 huge markets. And if a conference like the Big Ten with the network it has and the sort of money it generates reaches into those markets with the big brand names they already have, with Ohio State and Michigan and some of the others, then it's going to be a big boon for the Big Ten. So, contrary to what a lot of people say, they say, "Hey, Maryland's not real strong in football. How's this really going to help them?" That's how it's going to help them, because a lot more people are going to be able to see that quality of football way more often, and they'll be basically cut off from the ACC. The way it's been accustomed to over the last several decades.
Got you. Now, as far as the ACC goes, what do they do in response? Do they go out and try to replace Maryland? I mean, they have a funny situation with Notre Dame in every sport except for football, so you kind of got an even odd number of teams depending on which sport you're talking about. What is the ACC response to this, do you think?
You know, what's tough for them is that this probably happened at the worst time, with Notre Dame becoming the number one ranked team in the country. So their leverage did nothing but increase, and they have no reason to want to join up in the ACC in football anymore, if they ever really had any. There's talk that they'll take Connecticut out of the Big East, which would help enormously in basketball, but clearly the thought process with all these moves over the last few years, the big moneymaker is football, and how much UConn does for them as far as a football brand kind of remains to be seen. It doesn't seem particularly strong now. I think what they need to do more than anything else is hang on to the strengths that they have, and don't let Miami get away, don't let Florida State get away, and Virginia Tech and Clemson. I mean, they're the brand names in football right now, and even though they're not on the level of a BCS championship contender, they're still very important components, and if they get away, then the ACC is going to start looking very weak.
Right, and they certainly would have the potential to get on that level if everything goes right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's ACC. It's not. They haven't quite slid down to Big East level, and by any means, or by any stretch. I mean, actually having Notre Dame be a part of them in the manner that it is, and having Syracuse and Pittsburgh join up, it definitely helps them. I mean, the moves that they made before definitely strengthens them, but this is going to be difficult for them because they're not. They've fallen back a step in comparison to the bigger conferences they're chasing. It's hard to see what bold move is out there. The big schools have really kind of aligned themselves. It would have been nice if they could have figured out a way to get West Virginia in there, but West Virginia got away before all this happened, and you kind of have to put that in the loss column for the ACC. It's not easy. It's not dire straits yet, but it's not going to be easy for the ACC the next few years to sort of compensate for losing Maryland the way it did.
Absolutely. All right, David, listen, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me.